Man finds hidden bunker in desert sands, but what he sees inside leaves him frozen. The Nevada sun hammered down like a merciless forge, turning the desert floor into a shimmering mirage of heat waves. Ethan Harris wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his gloved hand, leaving a streak of red dust across his forehead. For 3 days he had been combing this desolate stretch of nowhere, following geological surveys that suggested rare mineral deposits lay buried beneath these ancient sands. At 34, Ethan had spent the better part of a decade as an independent geologist, chasing elusive deposits of lithium, rare earth elements, and precious metals across the American Southwest. It was lonely work, but it paid well when you struck gold, literally or figuratively. His beat-up Toyota truck sat parked a quarter-mile behind him, loaded with equipment that had cost him nearly everything he owned. The metal detector in his hands had been silent for hours, producing nothing but the occasional ping from discarded bottle caps or rusted fragments of long-forgotten machinery. But something kept him moving forward, an instinct honed by years of reading the subtle language of rock and soil. That's when it happened. The detector exploded into a frenzy of beeps and clicks, the needle dancing wildly across the display. Ethan's heart rate quickened. This wasn't the sharp, focused signal of a small metallic object. This was something massive, something that stretched far beneath the surface. He dropped to his knees and began digging with his hands, then switched to the collapsible shovel from his pack. The sand gave way easily at first, but then his blade struck something hard. The metallic clang echoed strangely in the desert air, as if the sound had somewhere to go rather than simply dissipating into the vastness. "What the hell?" Ethan muttered, brushing away more sand. What emerged was not rock or mineral, but smooth, polished steel. Not the rusted, weathered metal he might expect from some long-buried piece of equipment, but something that looked almost maintained. He expanded his digging, following the edge of whatever lay beneath. An hour later, drenched in sweat and covered in fine desert dust, Ethan stared at what he had uncovered. It was clearly man-made, a section of what appeared to be a large, rectangular structure. The steel surface was marked with strange symbols and numbers that meant nothing to him, but the craftsmanship was undeniable. This wasn't some random piece of debris blown out here by desert winds. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Ethan knew he should head back to his truck, set up camp, and return in the morning with better equipment. But something about the structure called to him. The rational part of his mind screamed caution. He was alone in the middle of nowhere, with limited supplies and no cell phone coverage. But his curiosity, the same drive that had made him a successful prospector, overrode his better judgment. He continued digging as the light faded, using the powerful LED headlamp strapped to his forehead. The structure revealed itself to be larger than he had imagined, much larger. What he had initially thought might be a buried storage container or an old military supply cache was clearly something far more substantial. Then he found the corner, and everything changed. Following the edge of the structure, Ethan's shovel struck something different, not the smooth steel surface, but what felt like hinges. Heavy, industrial hinges that suggested a doorway or access panel. His hands trembling with excitement and exhaustion, he cleared away more sand. What he uncovered made him sit back on his heels in disbelief. It was a door, or more accurately, a hatch. Circular, about 4 feet in diameter, with a wheel mechanism in the center that looked like something from a submarine or a bank vault. The metal was the same pristine steel as the rest of the structure, unmarked by rust or corrosion despite what had to be decades buried in the desert. But that wasn't what made his blood run cold. Around the edges of the hatch were warning signs in multiple languages: English, Russian, Chinese, and universal symbols that needed no translation. Radiation warnings, biohazard symbols, and something else that made his stomach clench, a series of numbers that looked like dates, all from the early 1960s. Ethan's mind raced. The 1960s were the height, a time when both the United States and Soviet Union had been conducting all manner of secret experiments and building hidden facilities. But what would either superpower want with this godforsaken patch of Nevada desert? The wheel mechanism looked functional, despite its age. Someone, or some organization, had built this place to last. The seals around the hatch appeared intact, suggesting that whatever was inside had been protected from the elements for all these years. As the desert night settled around him, bringing with it the sharp cold that always followed the brutal heat, Ethan made a decision that would change his life forever. He gripped the wheel with both hands and began to turn. The mechanism moved smoothly, almost effortlessly, as if it had been maintained yesterday rather than abandoned decades ago. With each turn, he could hear the sound of heavy bolts retracting, the deep mechanical groaning of a system designed to keep the outside world out, or perhaps, to keep something inside from getting out. The hatch opened with a soft hiss of escaping air, revealing a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow his headlamp beam. But in that brief moment before the light penetrated the depths, Ethan caught a smell that made his skin crawl, not the musty odor of decay he might have expected, but something clean and sterile, with an underlying metallic tang that reminded him of electrical equipment. As he peered into the opening, his light revealed a ladder descending into what appeared to be a well-constructed tunnel. The walls were lined with the same pristine steel as the hatch, and he could see electrical conduits running along the ceiling. This wasn't some hastily constructed bunker or storage facility. This was a sophisticated installation, built by people with serious resources and specific intentions. The ladder rungs were solid under his grip as he began his descent. 20 feet down, then 30, then 40. The tunnel seemed to go deeper than should have been possible given the relatively soft desert soil above. But as he reached the bottom and his feet touched solid ground, Ethan realized that this was only the beginning. Before him stretched a corridor that disappeared beyond the range of his light. The walls were lined with doors, heavy, vault-like barriers that looked like they belonged in a bank or military facility. And despite the decades that had passed since this place was apparently sealed, everything looked as if it had been abandoned yesterday. The air was cool and dry, with no hint of the oppressive desert heat above. Somewhere in the distance, he could swear he heard the faint hum of electrical equipment, as impossible as that seemed. Ethan stood at the threshold of discovery, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and growing unease. Whatever this place was, whoever had built it, they had gone to extraordinary lengths to keep it hidden. The question that gnawed at him as he took his first steps into the mysterious facility was simple but terrifying. What exactly was he about to find? Ethan's footsteps echoed hollowly in the corridor as he moved deeper into the facility. The beam of his headlamp swept across door after door, each one marked with cryptic alphanumeric codes that meant nothing to him. The hum he had heard earlier was growing stronger now, not the random electrical noise of failing equipment, but the steady, purposeful sound of machinery that was still somehow operational after all these years. The first door he tried was unlocked. The heavy vault-like barrier swung open with surprising ease, revealing a room that made him stop dead in his tracks. It was an office, but unlike any office from the 1960s he had ever seen. The furniture was sleek and modern, with clean lines that wouldn't have looked out of place in a contemporary tech company. Multiple computer terminals lined the walls, not the room-sized behemoths he would have expected from that era, but compact units with flat screens that looked decades ahead of their time. But it was the walls that truly captured his attention. Every available surface was covered with blueprints, diagrams, and technical drawings. Ethan approached the nearest wall, his engineering background allowing him to interpret some of the more basic schematics. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. These weren't plans for weapons or military equipment. They were energy systems, power generation designs that were so far advanced they seemed almost alien in their conception. The main blueprint, pinned prominently in the center of the largest wall, showed a device labeled Project Helios, Self-Sustaining Energy Matrix. Ethan studied the diagram with growing amazement. The system appeared to be some kind of closed-loop power generator, but unlike anything he had ever encountered. Traditional generators relied on external fuel sources, coal, natural gas, nuclear material, or renewable sources like wind and solar. But this design showed something entirely different, a system that appeared to generate power from nothing. The technical specifications were mind-boggling. According to the documentation, this single generator could produce enough electricity to power a city the size of Las Vegas indefinitely, without any external fuel source and with zero emissions. The implications were staggering. This technology could eliminate fossil fuels overnight, solve climate change, and revolutionize human civilization. Moving to the next room, Ethan found what appeared to be a workshop. Prototypes and components were scattered across metal tables, each piece machined to impossible tolerances. Some of the devices were partially assembled, giving him glimpses into the actual construction of the theoretical systems he had seen in the blueprints. One prototype caught his attention immediately. It was about the size of a briefcase, with smooth metallic surfaces and crystalline components that seemed to glow faintly in the beam of his flashlight. According to the attached documentation, this was a scale model of the Helios system, a miniature version designed to prove the concept before full-scale construction. The documentation was signed by Dr. Elena Vasquez, chief engineer, with a date stamp of March 15, 1963. Ethan frowned as he read the name. He had never heard of Dr. Vasquez, which was strange considering the revolutionary nature of her work. Someone developing this kind of technology should have been world-famous. The third room revealed even more mysteries. It was filled with materials that shouldn't have existed in 1963, advanced ceramics, crystalline structures that looked almost organic, and metals with properties that defied conventional understanding. Some of the materials were still active, emitting a soft phosphorescent glow that had apparently continued unabated for more than 60 years. Ethan picked up a research journal from one of the tables and began reading. The entries started optimistically, describing breakthrough after breakthrough in energy physics. Dr. Vasquez wrote about discovering new principles of quantum mechanics that allowed for the direct conversion of matter into energy without nuclear fission or fusion. Day 847 of Project Helios. One entry read, "We have achieved stable energy output at 73% of theoretical maximum. The implications are beyond anything we imagined when we started this project. We're not just creating a new power source, we're rewriting the laws of physics as we understand them." But as Ethan read further, the tone of the entries began to change. What had started as excitement and wonder gradually transformed into concern and fear. Day 952, strange readings from the quantum field generators. The energy output is increasing beyond our control parameters. Dr. Morrison believes we may have tapped into something we don't fully understand. Day 967, the test facility in Building C suffered a complete power surge today. All equipment fried instantly. No one was hurt, but the implications are troubling. The energy seems to be growing. The final room Ethan explored contained the most disturbing discovery yet. It was clearly a meeting room, with a large conference table surrounded by chairs. But scattered across the table were evacuation plans, emergency protocols, and what appeared to be orders for the immediate shutdown of the entire facility. A thick folder marked "Classified Project Termination" contained documents that made Ethan's hands tremble as he read them. The final report, dated May 7, 1963, was signed by military officials he didn't recognize, but the content was clear. Project Helios was to be shut down immediately and all personnel relocated to secure facilities for debriefing and psychological evaluation. The reason for the shutdown was stated in clinical, bureaucratic language, but between the lines, Ethan could read the panic. Uncontrolled energy cascades, potential for catastrophic system failure, recommend immediate burial of facility pending development of containment protocols. As he absorbed the implications of what he was reading, that steady humming sound he had been hearing seemed to grow louder. It wasn't his imagination. Somewhere in this facility, something was still powered, still operational after more than 60 years. The technology in this room could change the world, solve humanity's energy crisis, and usher in a new age of prosperity. But the people who had created it had been so terrified by what they had discovered that they had buried it in the desert and walked away. The question that now haunted Ethan was simple: what had they been so afraid of? The humming grew more pronounced as Ethan ventured deeper into the facility. He followed the sound through a maze of corridors, each turn revealing more evidence of the advanced research that had taken place here. Emergency lighting flickered on as he passed motion sensors, casting eerie shadows on the pristine walls. At the end of the main corridor, he found what appeared to be the facility's nerve center, a control room with banks of monitors and control panels that stretched from floor to ceiling. Most of the screens were dark, but several still displayed scrolling data in languages and symbols he couldn't decipher. It was here, scattered across the floor like leaves after a violent storm, that Ethan discovered the personal accounts of what had really happened in this buried laboratory. The first journal he picked up belonged to Dr. Elena Vasquez herself. Her handwriting, initially neat and precise, became increasingly erratic as the entries progressed. The dates told a story of growing desperation over the final weeks of Project Helios. April 3, 1963. The energy output has stabilized at 89% efficiency, but we're seeing anomalous readings from the quantum substrate. The field generators are producing power levels that exceed our theoretical maximums. Dr. Chin believes we may have accidentally created a resonance effect with an unknown energy source. Ethan flipped through several pages, finding more technical details that were beyond his comprehension. But the emotional tone was unmistakable. Excitement was giving way to concern. April 18, 1963. Third power surge this week. The backup generators in Sector 7 completely melted down. The metal didn't just overheat, it seemed to dissolve at a molecular level. I've never seen anything like it. We're dealing with forces that our current understanding of physics can't explain. Another journal, this one belonging to someone named Dr. Marcus Chin, provided a different perspective. His entries were more technical, filled with equations and diagrams, but the underlying message was the same: something was going terribly wrong. April 22, 1963. The quantum field is becoming self-sustaining. We designed the system to draw energy from vacuum fluctuations, but it appears to be amplifying those fluctuations rather than just harvesting them. The energy cascade is growing exponentially. If my calculations are correct, we may have accidentally created a feedback loop with the fabric of space-time itself. Ethan's hands trembled as he read those words. Even with his limited understanding of quantum physics, he could grasp the implications. They hadn't just created a new power source, they had potentially destabilized the fundamental structure of reality in this location. The most disturbing journal belonged to Dr. James Morrison, whose entries became increasingly frantic as the final days approached. April 28, 1963. The containment fields are failing. We've lost complete control of the energy matrix. The power output is now 340% above theoretical maximum and climbing. The facility's structural integrity is being compromised by some kind of resonance effect. Metal components are vibrating themselves apart, and the concrete foundations are developing stress fractures that seem to appear from nowhere. April 30, 1963. God help us, we've made a terrible mistake. The energy isn't just growing, it's changing. The quantum signature is unlike anything in our models. It's as if we've torn a hole in reality itself, and something is pouring through. The entire facility is beginning to, I don't know how else to describe it, phase in and out of normal space. Objects are disappearing and reappearing in different locations. Time itself seems distorted near the main generator. The final entry in Morrison's journal was barely legible, written in what appeared to be a desperate scrawl. May 2, 1963, evacuation ordered. The generator achieved critical resonance at 14:37 today. The explosion, it wasn't an explosion. The energy somehow inverted, creating a localized space-time distortion. 3 team members were caught in the field when it collapsed. They didn't die, they simply ceased to exist, as if they had never been born. No bodies, no remains, just absence. The field is contracting now, drawing everything back into the generator core. We have perhaps hours before the entire facility is consumed. The military has ordered immediate burial of the site. They're bringing in enough sand to bury this place under 50 feet of desert. They say it's temporary, until they can develop proper containment protocols. But I know better. This technology isn't just dangerous, it's impossible. We've created something that shouldn't exist in our universe. The only safe choice is to bury it and hope that future generations are wiser than we were. The last page of Morrison's journal contained a crude map of the facility, with several areas marked as unstable and avoid at all costs. The central generator room was circled multiple times, with a single word written in large, desperate letters. Active. Ethan sat back on his heels, the implications crashing over him like a cold wave. The facility hadn't been abandoned because of a simple accident or equipment failure. It had been sealed because the scientists had accidentally created something that violated the laws of physics, a technology so dangerous that it had literally warped reality around itself. And according to Morrison's final notes, the generator was still active. The steady humming that had been his constant companion since entering the facility suddenly took on a sinister quality. It wasn't the sound of failing equipment winding down after decades of neglect. It was the sound of something that had been waiting, patiently, for someone to find it again. As if responding to his growing fear, the lights in the control room began to flicker more rapidly, and the humming grew noticeably louder. Somewhere in the depths of this buried facility, the machine that had terrified its creators into burying an entire research installation was still running, still growing stronger, and still waiting for someone foolish enough to complete what they had started. Against every instinct screaming at him to turn around and leave, Ethan found himself drawn deeper into the facility. The map from Morrison's journal had shown the generator room at the very heart of the complex, accessible through a heavily reinforced corridor marked with radiation warnings and biohazard symbols. The humming was no longer just a sound, it had become a physical presence, a vibration that seemed to resonate in his bones. With each step toward the central chamber, the air itself felt different, charged with an energy that made the hair on his arms stand on end. The final corridor was unlike the others he had traversed. The walls here were lined with lead plating, and massive blast doors stood partially open, their thick steel frames twisted and warped as if subjected to incredible forces. Emergency lights bathed everything in a hellish red glow, and the temperature had dropped noticeably, creating an almost supernatural chill that seemed to seep into his soul. As Ethan approached the entrance to the generator room, he noticed something that made him stop dead in his tracks. The concrete floor beneath his feet showed stress fractures that formed perfect geometric patterns, fractals that seemed to pulse and shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. The damage wasn't random. It was as if reality itself had been strained to its breaking point. He stepped through the twisted blast doors and entered the chamber that had haunted the nightmares of its creators for over 60 years. The generator dominated the vast circular room like a technological cathedral. It was massive, easily 3 stories tall and stretching nearly 100 feet in diameter. But it was unlike any machine Ethan had ever seen. The core structure appeared to be constructed from that same impossible metal he had encountered in the workshops, but here it seemed almost alive, pulsing with veins of light that flowed through its surface like luminescent blood. Surrounding the central core were dozens of smaller devices, field generators, Morrison's journal had called them. These satellite units floated several feet above the floor, suspended by forces that Ethan couldn't comprehend. They rotated slowly around the main generator in complex orbital patterns, creating a mesmerizing dance of technology and energy. But what truly terrified him was the realization that the entire system was still operational. The generator hummed with barely contained power, its surface glowing with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his own heartbeat. Status panels around the room displayed readings in multiple languages, showing energy outputs that climbed steadily higher with each passing moment. According to the displays, the system was currently operating at 127% of its theoretical maximum capacity, and the numbers continued to rise. Ethan circled the machine cautiously, noting the warning signs that had been hastily posted around the chamber's perimeter. Danger: quantum field distortion. Read 1. Do not approach within 20 feet of core assembly, warned another. Most ominously, a handwritten sign near the main control panel simply stated, God forgive us. As he studied the central core more closely, Ethan began to notice subtle distortions in the air around it. The space near the generator seemed to shimmer and bend, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt, but in patterns that hurt his eyes to follow. Occasionally, he could swear he saw glimpses of elsewhere. Brief flashes of different places, different times, as if the machine was somehow creating windows into other realities. The control panels told a story of gradual system failure and desperate attempts to regain control. Handwritten notes were taped to various monitors, documenting the scientists' final hours as they watched their creation spiral beyond their understanding. One note, in Elena Vasquez's handwriting, simply read, "It's learning. The system is adapting and evolving beyond our programming. We've created something that operates by rules we don't understand." A massive logbook lay open on the central control station, its pages filled with increasingly frantic entries documenting the generator's behavior in its final days of supervised operation. The last entry, dated May 2, 1963, was written in Morrison's shaking hand. 1542 energy output now at 298% and climbing. The quantum field is creating spontaneous matter conversion events. A wrench disappeared from my hand and reappeared embedded in the wall, not thrown, but literally translated through space-time. The field generators are no longer following their programmed orbits. They're moving in patterns we never designed, as if they're communicating with each other. 1615 God help us, it's not just generating power, it's generating reality. The field distortions are creating pockets of altered space-time throughout the facility. Time moves differently near the core. I watched a coffee cup fall and hit the ground before I dropped it. Cause and effect are breaking down. 1630 final entry. The system has achieved full autonomy. We are no longer in control. The generator is sustaining itself by drawing energy directly from the quantum vacuum, but it's doing more than that. It's rewriting the fundamental constants of physics in the local area. We're evacuating now. May God have mercy on whatever we've unleashed. As Ethan read these words, the generator's hum suddenly intensified. The orbital field generators began moving faster, their patterns becoming more complex and chaotic. The displays around the room flickered and scrolled through readings that climbed at an alarming rate. Most terrifying of all, the machines seemed to be responding to his presence. The energy patterns shifted and pulsed more rapidly when he moved, as if the system was aware of him, studying him, perhaps even welcoming him. The temperature in the chamber dropped another 10 degrees, and frost began forming on the metal surfaces despite the obvious heat being generated by the core. The laws of thermodynamics were being casually violated by forces beyond human comprehension. Ethan backed toward the exit, his heart pounding with the realization that he was not just observing an abandoned piece of technology. He was standing in the presence of something that had transcended the boundaries of normal science and entered the realm of the impossible. The generator was alive, growing stronger with each passing moment, and after 60 years of patient waiting in the darkness, it had finally found someone who might be willing to help it complete its mysterious purpose. Ethan stumbled back through the twisted corridors, his mind reeling from what he had witnessed in the generator chamber. The rational part of his brain struggled to process the impossible, a machine that defied the laws of physics, that seemed to possess some form of awareness, and that held the power to either revolutionize human civilization or destroy it entirely. He found himself back in Dr. Vasquez's office, surrounded by the blueprints and research documents that had first revealed the scope of Project Helios. But now, having seen the actual generator in operation, the papers took on a completely different meaning. This wasn't just theoretical research, it was a roadmap to reshaping reality itself. Ethan spread the main blueprint across the desk and studied it with new understanding. The energy output specifications were staggering. According to the calculations, a fully operational Helios generator could provide clean, unlimited power for the entire planet. No more fossil fuels. No more nuclear waste. No more energy poverty. The technology could solve climate change overnight and usher in an era of unprecedented prosperity. The implications went far beyond simple power generation. With unlimited clean energy, humanity could tackle problems that had seemed insurmountable. Desalination plants could provide fresh water to drought-stricken regions. Massive atmospheric processors could reverse pollution and restore damaged ecosystems. Space exploration could become routine, opening up the solar system for colonization and resource extraction. But as Ethan sat in the eerily quiet office, he couldn't shake the memory of Morrison's terrified final entries. The same technology that promised salvation had once torn holes in the fabric of space-time itself. It had made people simply cease to exist, not just finishing them but erasing them from reality, as if they had never been born. A folder marked Theoretical Applications caught his attention. Inside, he found documents that made his breath catch. The scientists hadn't just been working on power generation, they had discovered principles that could revolutionize medicine, transportation, and even human understanding of consciousness itself. One paper, titled Quantum Field Manipulation for Cellular Regeneration, suggested that the same energy principles could be used to reverse aging, cure cancer, and heal injuries at the molecular level. Another document outlined plans for space-time transit systems, essentially teleportation technology that could make interstellar travel instantaneous. The potential benefits were beyond imagination, but each document came with handwritten notes expressing growing concern about uncontrolled applications. Dr. Chen had scrawled warnings in the margins. Cellular regeneration tests resulted in uncontrolled mutation. And transit system prototype created temporal paradoxes in laboratory mice. Ethan leaned back in the chair, overwhelmed by the weight of what he had discovered. In his hands lay the keys to solving humanity's greatest challenges. Energy crisis, climate change, disease, aging, even death itself, all could potentially be conquered with the technology humming in the chamber below. But he also held the potential for humanity's destruction. The generator was currently operating at over 130% of its theoretical maximum, and climbing. The scientists' own notes made it clear that they had lost control of the system long before it reached such levels. If Ethan somehow managed to restart the facility's full operations, to bring the entire Helios project back online, what guarantee was there that he could control forces that had defeated some of the brightest minds of the 1960s? He thought about the world above, a planet struggling with environmental collapse, energy shortages, and growing inequality. How many lives could be saved with unlimited clean energy? How much suffering could be prevented with the medical applications alone? Then he remembered the stress fractures in the concrete, the way reality had seemed to bend around the generator core, and Morrison's haunting words about people simply ceasing to exist. The moral weight of the decision pressed down on him like a physical force. He could walk away, seal the facility, and let the technology remain buried forever. Billions of people would continue to suffer from problems that this technology could solve, but at least they would continue to exist. Or he could take the risk. He could attempt to study the system, to understand how the original scientists had lost control, and to find a way to safely harness the incredible power of the Helios generator. The potential rewards were unlimited, but so too was the potential for catastrophe. Ethan found himself pacing the small office, wrestling with questions that no human being should have to face alone. Who was he to make such a decision? What right did he have to either deny humanity this technology, or risk destroying everything in the attempt to master it? The humming from the generator chamber seemed to be growing louder, as if the machine was calling to him, urging him to complete what its creators had started. The energy readings he had seen were still climbing. At some point, the system might reach critical levels whether he intervened or not. But perhaps that was just fear talking. Perhaps the system had reached a stable operating level and would continue functioning safely for decades to come. The scientists had been working in 1963, with limited understanding of quantum mechanics and primitive computer systems. Modern science might hold the keys to controlling what they could not. As dawn approached somewhere far above the buried facility, Ethan sat surrounded by the work of brilliant minds who had reached too far and paid the ultimate price. The technology before him could save the world or end it. The question that would haunt him forever was simple: which outcome was more likely, and did he have the courage to find out? Ethan spent the entire night in the depths of the facility, poring over every document, every journal entry, every scrap of data that might help him understand the true nature of what the scientists had created. As the hours passed, a clearer picture emerged, not just of the technology itself, but of the hubris that had led to its burial. The scientists of Project Helios had been brilliant, but they had also been reckless. In their excitement to push the boundaries of human knowledge, they had ignored warning signs, dismissed safety protocols, and rushed toward applications they didn't fully comprehend. Their notes revealed a pattern of cutting corners, of taking risks that no responsible researcher should have taken. But more importantly, Ethan realized something that the original team had not. The generator wasn't just producing energy, it was learning. Each surge, each fluctuation, each malfunction had been the system adapting, growing, becoming something more than its creators had intended. The machine wasn't broken or dangerous, it was evolving. As dawn broke somewhere far above the buried laboratory, Ethan made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He carefully gathered the most crucial blueprints and research notes, photographing them with his phone's camera despite the lack of cell service. These documents represented decades of advanced research, theoretical breakthroughs that were still ahead of current scientific understanding. But he would not attempt to reactivate the system. The walk back to the generator chamber felt like a funeral march. The machine continued its eternal vigil, humming with power that could reshape the world. The orbital field generators spun in their complex patterns, and the energy readings on the displays had climbed to nearly 140% of theoretical maximum. Standing before the massive device, Ethan felt a profound sense of loss. Here was the solution to humanity's greatest challenges, a technology that could end suffering and open up limitless possibilities for human advancement. And he was going to walk away from it. But as he studied the stress fractures in the floor, as he watched the way space itself seemed to bend around the generator core, he knew he was making the right choice. The original scientists had been brilliant, but they had created something beyond their control. Modern science might be more advanced, but the fundamental problem remained: this technology operated by rewriting the laws of physics themselves. No amount of safety protocols could contain forces that could literally erase people from existence. Ethan placed his hand on the main control panel, feeling the vibration of incredible power flowing through the system. For a moment, he was tempted. One switch, one command sequence, and he could begin the process of bringing the full Helios project back online. The potential benefits flashed through his mind: unlimited clean energy, medical breakthroughs, the end of poverty and environmental destruction. Instead, he turned away. The journey back through the facility felt different now. Each room held the dreams and nightmares of researchers who had reached too far too fast. In Dr. Vasquez's office, he left a handwritten note explaining what he had found and why he had chosen not to interfere with the system. Future generations might develop the wisdom and technology necessary to safely harness what lay buried here, but that time was not now. At the facility's entrance, Ethan paused for one final look at the impossible technology that would haunt his dreams. The humming seemed almost mournful now, as if the machine understood it was being abandoned once again. But perhaps that was just his imagination. The ladder back to the surface seemed endless, but finally, Ethan emerged into the blazing heat of the Nevada desert. The contrast between the cool, sterile environment below and the harsh reality above was jarring. He sealed the hatch carefully, noting the GPS coordinates on his phone. Someday, when humanity was ready, others would need to find this place. Using his geological survey equipment, Ethan created a careful map of the site, marking it with subtle indicators that would be meaningless to casual observers but clear to future researchers who might need to locate the facility. He buried small metallic markers at specific points around the perimeter, a breadcrumb trail for the scientists of tomorrow. As he drove away from the site, kicking up clouds of desert dust, Ethan carried with him the weight of his decision. The blueprints and research data in his truck represented the most significant technological breakthrough in human history. But they also came with the responsibility to ensure that future attempts to develop this technology would be approached with the caution and wisdom that the original Project Helios team had lacked. Over the following months, Ethan would quietly establish a research foundation, using his own resources and carefully selected partners to study the implications of what he had discovered. The Foundation's mission was simple: to develop the theoretical framework necessary to safely approach the kind of advanced energy research that had been attempted in the 1960s. The technology remained buried beneath the desert sands, its generators humming patiently as they had for over 60 years. But now there was hope that someday, when humanity was truly ready, the incredible potential of Project Helios might finally be realized, not through reckless ambition, but through careful preparation and deep respect for the forces they sought to harness. Ethan had chosen wisdom over power, patience over immediate gratification. In doing so, he had perhaps saved the world from a catastrophe that its creators had been too excited to prevent. The bunker would wait, and so would the future it represented.